Right. Strange things that would. Let's see why. That should help. Okay. Warm welcome to everyone in attendance tonight and those watching along at home. I now declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. We'll start as always with acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play. We pay our respects to Jargon country and elders past and present. We recognise the continued connection with these lands and waterways and extend this acknowledgement to the homelands and stories of those who call this place home. We recognise our future leaders and the shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. I remind councillors and all those present that this meeting is being live streamed and your image and what you say may be broadcast live to the public, so please be mindful of your actions and your comments. You should avoid making statements that might defame or offend, and note that a recording of this meeting will be made online and in council archives. Please turn your mobile phones off or switch to silent. Filming and photography are not permitted in the meeting. Anyone observed to be filming the meeting may be asked to leave. Item 1.4, I don't have any apologies or requests to attend via audio visual, and it looks like that remains the case. So I'll move to disclosure of interest. Firstly, myself, I confirm that I do not have any conflicts on the agenda. As voting members, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Crowley or Councillor Eaton, do you have any conflicts to declare?
No known conflicts.
Perfect. And do any of the other members here tonight have anything to declare? Perfect. Confirmation of the minutes. I now call a move for the recommendation as. Thank you, Councillor Eaton. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crowley, thank you very much. I now put the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand and keep it raised. McGregor?
I was going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting. It's the last meetings.
So that is carried. Noting that Councillor McGregor abstained. That is everyone. So I'll now move on to item 2.1, and we do have a presentation for this, being the quarterly budget review statement. So I invite Director Marissa Rakamalira to speak to the report.
Thanks, Chair. So really proud to present the organisation's Q3 review. I'm going to just speak briefly on the progress against our operational plan, and then I'm going to hand over to our CFO, Emma Galea, to go through the finances. Really pleasingly, there's been a lot of progress and that we remain on track for substantial delivery by the end of the financial year. There are a few decisions that are required and there are staff recommendations to align with those. So those decisions are around the adjustments to the operational budget, adjustments to the capital budget, and just considering the fuel budget adjustment and expenditure for this quarter, which is outlined in the recommendation, and I'll just touch on a little bit briefly later on. So in terms of our progress, you can see that Council is substantially on track to deliver. The majority of our operational plan actions are either on track or completed at about 95%. And the service delivery is continuing across all key areas in the business. There are a couple of minor delays which I'll touch on, and some delays in capital works, mostly due to external factors. And our financial position overall remains stable. It is tightening, that's a good thing, so we're getting tighter onto our budget. However, there are a number of risks across the business and in the external environment that we need to be aware of. We've read the second report, which highlights some of those, so we just need to keep on top of those. In terms of our actual performance across most of our core services, we have 57 external KPIs. Of those, the vast majority are on track. There are 2 actions and projects that are slightly delayed. The first one is our Disability Inclusion Action Plan, our DAP, which has been slightly delayed at the end of the quarter, but you will note it's on the agenda for tonight. So we are progressing that, which is really great to see. And our LSPS, so the Local Strategic Planning Statement, the draft for that came to council in April. So we are continuing to progress that as well. In terms of our KPIs, there are 57 KPIs and the vast majority we're on track with or have completed. There are 5 that are delayed. The report outlines those in details, but I will just touch on them. So the first is our percentage parks and reserve maintenance. The goal is 90% and we're at 89%. So we're just slightly off, just the tiniest little bit. Pathway construction, there's a substantial reduction in what we've intended to deliver this financial year, and some of those are going to need to be pushed into next year. A number of reasons for that in terms of approvals and heritage, and those are outlined in the report. Our DA mean assessment time has reduced from 146 days last September down to 117 days, but it's just short of our target of 95 days. But we are continuing to progress and get closer and closer to that each time. There's a drop in our non-food public health inspections where we've only hit 33% when we were aiming for 75%. Again, the focus has been on some of those higher risk areas in terms of those food related and other public health inspections. And our roadside vegetation maintenance, which is at 80%, where our target is 90%. So just falling short in relation to that. One of the things you'd be aware of, because we have explored this significantly in other quarterly reviews, is that the performance continues to just fall under target. Often that's as a result of weather. But this year in particular, there was a change to the way that safe work requires us to undertake some of those works requiring some additional resources. So as the team has worked through that, that's caused some delays. But hoping again, we may not hit target with that, but we're going to try really hard to get there. So that's the areas that we're continuing to work on. But I don't want to just highlight the negatives. There were a number of highlights across the quarter. So there were 16 engagement projects. We got the draft budget and the operational plan out, as you would all be aware that everyone worked really hard on that. There are some big events across that quarter, including Australia Day, Love Lanes and 3 citizenship ceremonies, and there was nearly 22,000 participants at those events, which is really fantastic. A heap of small events that hit all of our other key target groups, such as Harmony Day, DV training, Surf Camp for Indigenous Kids, Seniors Festival. You would be aware of the 4 regional economy strategies that went out on public exhibition and there was a lot of work put into those. Some significant progress on delivering the activities in our biodiversity strategy. The dredging program was run, so I know we're all really keen on that one. Rolled out the smart technology in the Gosford car parking to free up parking spaces in there, and obviously a big cross-directorate program in terms of the homelessness support and action in regard to Picnic Point and a couple of other locations. So some really big projects that got added to our workload in that period and delivered some great results for the community. So I did want to highlight those. Before I move on to finance and hand over to Emma, was there any questions on those aspects? Just letting you know that the executive team is here and present to answer any questions.
Yeah, I did have one question for Director Bolgoff just on the wood paths, just because, I appreciate the roadside mowing and the verge maintenance, etc., is just under the target. But the footpaths in particular, it looks like we're only 25% of the target. Is most of that the AHIP assessment or?
So there are a couple of sort of significant projects, both in Barron Park and sort of moving into the next financial year. So what that means is our target for this year isn't going to be met, but we're increasing.
I suppose that's a fair point, because I imagine out of the 12
Mr. Chair, would you mind asking the director to raise his voice slightly? I'm struggling to hear it.
Because I suppose out of the 12.9 kilometres, those 2 projects would be quite a considerable distance on that. And it's obviously based on length, not on project.
Right. Yeah. I don't have the numbers, but that's right.
That's fine. Councillor Eden.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I've got 3 questions on the capital budget changes, which I think maybe not all this year, going forward. So, Kalongra Sports Ground looks like it's back a little bit.
So the timeline for Kalongra has been slightly delayed. There were a range of different investigations that we had to carry out.
Can I make the same comment as Councillor Neal just did? Could you speak up a bit, please?
So the Kalongra timeline has blown out a bit, and that was as a result of a number of investigations that we had to do on site.
You get a revised timeline when it might be finished. Next one was the animal cares facility. Again, that seems to have gone back despite the committee wanting it to be fast tracked.
The tenders have gone out for the design and approvals, commissioned, and those will be completed by November, and then we'll move to construction.
But it seems to have slipped back in terms of the numbers in the report have gone further out.
Yes, there were some delays, but now it's getting back on track with the commissioning of the design and approval process. So that's
Richard, can we get a voted might be operational? Back.
get that.
Thank you.
So can I just add there's 2 things that have been mentioned already in relation to this. So what Brett Mixels is talking about is the design. It's also fast tracking the design. So there's 2 components in fast tracking the design at this point. And there's also going to be 2 options in the tender for construction as well. But we're going to be looking at, which I've mentioned, the construction assets in the past as well.
All I'm going on is the fact the numbers have gone further out.
Just to clarify, Kalongra has been out to tender and it's now in the selection and so.
And the last one I had was FOGO. I really was struggling with the figures on that. Has it come forward a little?
No.
The numbers sort of seem to just go round in circles. I couldn't figure out what was going on.
So there are, I think, 3 sets of numbers that are negative and one positive. So what that totals is the $50 million. So what council has been discussing in relation to FOGO was a capital investment in relation to construction, or an option to, I suppose, amortise it over a period and then potentially look at, subsidising people's bills as well, and using the funds there to minimise the shock in, as the price path to increase costing and potentially. That's why that's been removed. Simple.
Right.
Answer.
Right. Thank you. That was my question.
Councillor Guerrero.
You made some reference earlier, Director Bulgoff, to Tuggerawong. Could you just expand on that in regards to the potential delays of the sequencing of the project?
Through the chair, we're looking at around it's a nice project, get different components, and part of that is going to be day labour as well as contract. So there'll be several contracts. The timing now is looking to be fully delivered by March 2027. So that's been looking at the progress of that, and the approvals are coming together. We'll be going out to shortly a number of stages of that. The remaining component, which is what you would understand as stage 5.
So by March 2027, we did the site visit last year, quite close to the oval there. Is that where that is anticipated that the pathway will end up at that point, or will it be further back?
I've got some diagrams in relation to the pathway going around the oval. That's and where we were on site, it'll be going not quite in the water, but foreshore through that area between Small and
So just so I understand, so but it will be stopping before we get to the Oval, or by March 2077 it will actually go around the Oval?
It'll go around.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Sorry, Mr Chair, I did a couple of other questions, not on the capital budget, but on the overall budget.
Well, I was about to say the same thing. Do you want to wait till that gives her presentation?
Well, it's probably more issues for directors than it is.
Okay, sure, go for it.
So the first one is legal costs. So I understand that Martin Ball has left us fairly recently and quite suddenly. And all back last year, the reason that we had a blowout in legal costs given by staff was that we didn't have internal legal practitioner, and that was going to be fixed now that we did. 6 months into the year, he's gone. I understand it's an operational issue, but where it comes back to is, are we going to have another blowout in legal costs?
Correct, do you want to say that one?
Yeah, thank you for the question, councillor. Yes, our previous principal solicitor has exited the organisation. We wasn't suddenly. We knew it was coming. There've been multiple discussions about it, and that had enabled us to pre-plan and to recruit for the role. And we're currently in the offer stage of recruiting another principal solicitor. So any adverse impact on legal costs has been contained.
You know, Director, why that person left? Because I know he'd been as long as I can remember.
Yeah, so he left for personal reasons.
Okay, fair.
He's
We'd be asking.
been here and gone, here and gone. It's
As I said, I mean, I understand it's operational, but well, in terms of we're going to have another blowout in legal costs, that's irrelevant.
That seems relevant.
Yes, well, that's why I'm interested.
We are not seeking any additional funding for legal costs.
Can we get a figure for year to date there?
Yep.
Other questions?
That's it, thank you.
Would you like to give your presentation?
So looking at the financial performance as at the end of Q3. So in summary, at the end of March, the operating result was tracking better than the year-to-date budget as at that point in time. Revenue was generally travelling okay. Whilst having had to adversely impact the overall budget, in Q3 we have seen some key pressures emerging. And we do have a separate report about some of those businesses. But it includes some reduced discretionary income, materials and construction costs, some contractor and labour shortages, which can cause pressure. And the interest rates, there's two sides to it, where we've got certain types of investment instruments that we have been adversely impacted. Whilst the interest rates, whilst it hasn't, we haven't seen really a major improvement straight away, but that's on the right track. So there's a mixed pressure there. Flagging that part of the full year budget to take us through the end of the year, there's an assumed 50% of the 26-27 financial assistance grant prepayment. Should we get any less than 50%, that would adversely impact it. So we have not adjusted for that because we just do not know. And there was a webinar this last week, and there was no further information on that either. So and our cash and reserves remain within acceptable levels. Just looking at the actual numbers, so on a consolidated position, so this is the budgeted position as at the end of March. So due to the phasing of the financial assistance grant as at the end of March, we were budgeting for an 8.5 million deficit position on a consolidated basis. Where we've actually landed was at 3.4. So we are better off than where we landed. If we look at it separately between general fund and water and sewer, the favourable variations at the end of March relates to the general fund, where we've got a surplus of 8.5 compared to the budgeted surplus Water and sewer, there's a slightly taken off track. In terms of the capital expenditure, so the way the estimated on a consolidated basis, we were planning to be at 174 million. We were at 60 million. And the split there, so for general fund was 92 million against a budgeted amount of 103, and water and sewer were at 68 million against a budget amount of 71 million.
Sorry, Emma, these are expenditure, aren't they?
Yes. Yep. And this is as at the end of quarter three, both for budgets and actuals. From a financial performance overall, what it means is that based on where we landed, council remains financially sustainable in the short term. However, careful management is required to maintain long-term sustainability. And as we would be aware, there are currently external economic factors that are quite difficult to predict. So the best thing we can do is be aware and plan for those. In terms of the proposed budget changes, so overall, I've got a snapshot here of where we started in terms of the budget this year. So we started consolidated a budgeted surplus of 9.7 when we adopted the budget. In Q3, that went slightly down, and Q2. In Q3, it's slightly went further down. However, the downward movement on a consolidated basis is predominantly driven by the water and sewer budget. And the reason for that is the water and sewer expenditure is focused on satisfying the current determination. So, and once we reset with a new determination, then we would expect the actuals and budgets to be more aligned. But for the general fund, which is the position there has continued to slightly improve from when we adopted it to where we are now, which fair to say, probably given the magnitude of the slight improvements, they're quite low in the context of our own budget. So I can say that the budget position has been fairly stable, and we are not anticipating that will change by the end of the financial year. The details of the actual budget changes are in the report. From a capital works perspective, so what we do each quarter, we propose to adjust the budget for this financial year, but then we also reflect the changes to the outer year so that we keep a rolling 4-year accurate program. So for Q3, the capital budget is being proposed to be reduced by 5.6 million. And that's a lot of that. There's various reasons there. So there's council resolutions, some changes due to when we went out to tender and quotes came back, some changes in scope, etc. So overall, as you can see, for the 4 years, we have not reduced the capital works, but it is reduced this financial year. In terms of the capital works changes budget, how we've tracked throughout the year, so we adopted a program of 320 million, and as we revised each quarter, we are now we're proposing to be at 200. So with the capital works budget and the operating budget, we'll review the opportunity to make sure that we align budgets with where we expect to be. Because if we don't do that, then we get to June and we have a big gap. So the idea is to adjust as early as possible. And there's been a lot of focus on reviewing or identifying changes as early as possible.
That's the slide.
Yeah, just on this slide. So capital's down to 280. Depreciation presumably is still at 300 and something or other. So effectively, we're building a $30 million cash surplus.
Budget process.
So any unspent,
Yes.
unspent capital.
Well, it's capital, not income, it's capital.
Any further questions on the slide to this point? Because I appreciate
General trend of slightly improved financial position this year. Is that consistent with the same trends from previous years? Is it always the same graph trend?
There's generally an improvement throughout the year, and that's probably a reflection that we start preparing budgets in October. So as you move throughout the year, there's a bit of an increased level of confidence, both for good adjustments and bad adjustments. There's a bit more certainty. So the short answer is yes, but there is what we've observed this financial year is that the changes are quite small, and there was bigger changes in the earlier quarters, and that's something that
I'm really talking about the whole year rather than just this last quarter. What I'm trying to ascertain is whether the improvement is consistent each year or whether it's changed. Because I'll tell you why I'm asking that. But
The fact that there is an improvement throughout the year is consistent. What has changed is the level of that improvement. So over the years, we've got tighter and tighter and tighter. So the level of improvement has decreased, but it's always been a slight improvement as we get that tighter. So that's probably the clearest thing.
you can't say it's a same percentage or the same amount.
It's a much reduced amount. So it's still an improvement, but a much reduced improvement each year as it gets closer and closer and closer between the budget and the actuals.
And the other significant wild card is we just don't know what's going to happen with that VAGS grant. That is it 55% or 45%? That's still to be
We budgeted for 50, so we've got less, and that's what
50% or 50%. Yeah.
So what I was going to ask, are we likely to know the budget, whether that's happening or not this year?
No, we don't. We generally know on the 30th of June.
The earliest in the last 5 years has been the 26th of June.
because our council meeting's on like the 20s.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Well, no.
But it's not to do with the budget. It'll be paid this year. So literally we get told, get it and it appears in our bank account, or we get told a day before that it's coming.
But you would think that, I would have thought you would know in the budget
Because it's a payment.
because there's savings in the federal government budget if they don't pay it until next year.
They have not foreshadowed the prepayment for several years, for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
They used to, in the budget night, they would say we're going to do the prepayment. Sometimes the Prime Minister would do it at the ALGA conference. But in the last 2 years, they've been clawing it back. So we used to get 100% prepayment. Then 2 years ago, we got, was it 85%? 35%. And then last year, we got 55% or something like that. They clawed back about 25%. And so we expect that so we're now more or less half of it we're guaranteed. The other half is at the whim of the government.
No, I understand that. I guess I can't see how they can't disclose it in the deep budget.
Well, they don't. They don't. And
They could change their numbers.
I've written many numbers. No, they don't.
No,
make it
budget papers are next year's.
An information session last week, a webinar on the financial assistance grant. It would be people that would know, and specific questions were asked around, is there going to be an indexation and then a prepayment? And the answer was they don't know.
no, it's always.
So it's the official one. That was just last week. Right, so some key takeaways to wrap up the Q3 in terms of both operational plan and financial performance, and also financial projections. So council is continuing to deliver essential services reliably. Infrastructure investment is ongoing with some delays. Financial position is stable but under pressure. Budget updates reflect real world conditions. So we changed the budget I said, to try and align as much as possible to where we think we're going to be. There are risks, and those risks are being actively managed to protect long-term sustainability. And just looking ahead, so obviously we'll continue to focus on complete projects. The continued cost management and efficiency improvements will continue to be built in, and some of that is reflected in those slight improvements as well, because we're still delivering, we're going to deliver. Monitoring economic conditions and report.
Okay. Can you give me a presentation as well on the next item in relation to the Middle East conflict?
Like
Sure. I wasn't sure. Okay, so there's you. I might hold my questions till that item there. Does anyone have any further questions on the budget?
I've got one more. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just obviously the risks we're facing. Do we have a risk framework? And if so, can we get a copy of it?
It's been under review for the last year or two. But yes, there's a risk framework and you can have a copy of it.
Okay. Take a long time to been under review for a couple of years. But anyhow, if we can get a copy, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any further questions on the budget, councillors? Okay. I'm happy to move what's on the screen if I have a seconder. Councillor Eaton. All those in favour? Unanimous? Councillors. I will now move on to.
Mr. Chair, you forgot to do the exception. I thought there might be a couple of exceptions.
Well, I think I personally have questions on
Everyone, okay.
most, but are there any ones particular that you think? Well, okay, is there anyone that?
I thought 24, 29, 210, but I mean, it's obviously whatever everyone else thinks.
I had a question on 210. I'd be happy with 2.4, 2.9, if that's good for councillors.
Hang on a second, so I'll look at the agenda.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not, I can't vote or put anything up by exception either, but I don't know if anybody else might be interested in 2.4. So if I just had some questions regarding the draft vision action plan.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Someone can sort of support that as a star, that would be good.
Yeah, that's fine. Happy to keep that in.
That would only leave 2.9 potentially.
Oh, we have to talk about that.
I don't mind if 2.9 goes through.
Okay. Am I able to?
I'll move that then.
I'm happy to second that. That item 2. Do you need that's good enough promotion? Perfect. Okay.
You better put it.
So I'll move. So we put it. So Councillor Eaton will move it. I'll second it. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Now move on to item 2.2, impact of the Middle East conflict on council. I understand we have a presentation.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to introduce Mr. Edward Hock, who's our Chief Governance Officer, alongside Emma Galea, our CFO. The organisation has been working extensively on responding to this issue, and we've got a brief presentation in addition to the report. So I will hand over. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. This is a situation that is dynamic and evolving every day. Council has stood up a business continuity planning working group to deal with the impacts, and already in the time that the war has been going on, the lens that we're casting over the issue has evolved. We started with a review of the impacts, particularly the financial impacts of fuel price increases, but as that has levelled off and stabilised somewhat, the working group is now looking more into the downstream impacts, including supply chain and secondary products that are reliant on fuel for their production. All of that in the context of the critical services that council provides. We have various critical services that cannot be disturbed and are also heavily reliant on supply chains and those secondary impacts like our water and sewer business in particular, and the capital program and the infrastructure maintenance that goes along with running those facilities. For the remainder of this financial year, we identified early on that we were in a strong position to weather financial impacts. As the war carries on and the uncertainty persists, we're in a less strong position to withstand financial impacts, and the uncertainty around the non-financial impacts, including supply chain, continue to cause us grief. This is a really hard situation that we're trying to manage, and every morning when you wake up, the landscape has changed again. At a macro level, this is a multi-agency issue. The federal government is providing guidance and insight. ALGA is advocating on behalf of councils to the federal government, and LG New South Wales is coordinating the response with the state government. There's been a really comprehensive amount of information sharing across all government sectors, and private sector is throwing its hat in the ring and providing support and insights to councils as well. We've been taking a risk-based approach, Councillor Eaton, to all of the discussions and decisions that we're taking, prioritising critical infrastructure and critical services, but also ensuring that we are prioritising the remainder of non-critical services to the greatest extent possible. And there's a workshop coming up, as you'll see in the report, Saturday week, to take the councillors through some of the potential options that are available to weather the ongoing storm. And we'll take you through the financial impacts.
So we've already started observing, especially with the fuel costs, impacts, especially where contractors have asked to pass on costs. There's some indirect increases through increased materials that are not necessarily including fuel, but things that some association with what's happening. Supply chain disruptions. There hasn't been anything major at the moment that has impacted a critical service, but it is something that the longer the situation goes on, that might become an issue. And also for council providing many services, the broader economic uncertainty, it doesn't just affect us, it affects our community. So there's certain discretionary income that may reduce with increasing cost of living pressures. So we kind of experience adverse impacts from both sides. So as Mr. Hawke said, this financial year, as you've seen from the earlier presentation, there is enough buffer there to continue to absorb those additional costs. However, next year's budget, probably we need to start thinking about some options there. So as council is aware, the exhibited operational surplus is 6 million. Very high level estimated impact, and I will note that it is quite challenging to come up with an exact figure or to say that there's an exact figure, because what's going to be impacted and how much and for how long. No one really knows that. So we have done some detailed analysis where there is industry information of how costs are being impacted, for example, the cost of fuel, the cost of bitumen, and we've made some assumptions and applied those to the budgeted materials and services for next financial year. So that's where the 13 million comes from, and that's excluding water and sewer. So for water and sewer line, the potential impact is around 5 million. But some of that may be able to be recouped through the CPI increase by IPART. So we don't know whether IPART is going to give us a higher CPI. It should, but then whether we pass that on as well. So there's a lot of variables and pieces to the equation. But based on that, this scale, we just wanted to highlight this potential scale. And whilst it is 13 million. In the context of our budget, it's 2% of our budget, of our overall budget. So it's a big number. Within the scale of our budget, probably not. So there is actions that council can look at the upcoming workshop about the exhibited budget, and that action will be on a spectrum. But essentially, if there was no action taken at all, and we did experience $30 million worth of cost increase, what that would mean is that council would go into deficit. That's worst case scenario based on the high level impact. We also looked at the impact on capital works, because also a lot of our capital works are civil works, so they are impacted by things that are impacted by the conflict. And again, we used industry information available, and depending whether you take the worst case kind of percentage or the range varies between 19 million and 35 million for next year. So again, it's just to give you an idea of the potential scale. And it is all potential because we don't know. So what we are proposing is that in a couple of weeks, there'll be a workshop to discuss the outcome of the submissions on the integrated planning reporting documents on the budget. And that will be a good time to actually consider some of those risks that we're facing and consider whether there's any action taken or plan to take any action. So it is a spectrum of actions. There's the do nothing approach at all, do nothing at all. There is the other extreme, which is looking at the operational plan to maintain the exhibited financial position. Or there is an in-between where we revise some things and we look at our existing cash reserves to buffer some of those negative impacts. So council may choose to have a deficit, but not by cash. So there's a lot of, it is a spectrum there of what council wants to do. And again, in a couple of weeks, the war may have ended or worse, or other impacts may have emerged. So as Mr. Hawke said, it's changing all the time. So from a financial framework point of view, this is what we will be looking at. And also just want to flag that whilst the budget has been on exhibition, there are two significant changes that we already know are adversely impact the budget. So one of those is the charging of the merchant fees. So for this council, that's about 400,000 of costs that we normally recover through the merchant fees. From October, we will no longer be able to recoup that cost, and we will still be paying the cost. So the banks will not stop charging us that cost.
We knew that well in advance. That's been
for a few months.
6 months.
No, not that long.
But I mean,
Came out straight after we exhibited the budget.
yeah, I know it comes in from October 1, but
Certainly been.
we've sort of, not us directly, but every entity who has this is being, I wouldn't say promised, but close to banks will come to the party a bit and reduce the fees. Have we had any inkling discussions with the bank about a reduction in that service charge cost?
Very vague, but there was nothing that's like they didn't commit that they were not charging us the merchant fees. Whether they reduce them, I don't know, but it's not going to be a direct offset. So it's not a case of we will not pay it, and therefore there's nothing to on cost.
Your experience, we obviously have 537 councils across Australia. Do most of the councils charge a surcharge?
I don't know if most, but there are certainly there are a number of councils that
I don't think most do.
No, that's what I'm saying. Currently, would most?
councils I've worked out have.
That sort of anecdotal evidence is fine. I was just curious.
So the other impact on the budget that we became aware recently was the emergency services levy. We budgeted an increase of 4%, at 7%, and it's about 208,000. So you add those two together, that's the surplus. So that's before any of this, but I thought it's important to flag that when we come back to council at the workshop, we will be talking about that as well. but it's a separate, that's more dealing with what we know. This is more planning for what might happen. So in terms of what council may, so depending on where council wants to sit financially, whether we want to stick to what we exhibited, or make it worse with reserves, or adjust services, service levels, etc. What we will need to look at is that the services that we offer, again, they're on a spectrum between essential services to discretionary services. So how we adjust those services, if council chooses to do that, will depend on where each service sits. So there's no one answer for all services. So for example, we may not be able to stop.
We've got to keep water and sewer going.
Keep water and sewer. I'm just trying to think of something that's not water. Still have from Jeremiah, but there's
Domestic waste.
domestic waste. Yeah, domestic.
Picking up bins.
Yeah, we can be like Naples to stop.
So essentially they're like halved the services.
West Council paying half their red bin service.
Multiple councils have done that. Yeah.
So again, depending where those services are is what council may wish to tweak or not. And essentially it's what the service response is going to be to the impact. And this council is in a good position in terms of we do have cash set aside. So that's good to have that up our sleeve. But again, the cash may be a short-term fix. If the conflict is ongoing and it becomes a structural budget issue, then the cash will not last forever. Also at the workshop, we'll be looking at the impact on capital work. So I referred to earlier an impact of somewhere between 19 to 35 million, 30 million. And that's coming through in cost through tenders, and potentially if there are supply chain issues, there could be delays as well. So again, probably the two main choices there when it comes to capital is, do we deliver what we exhibited at all costs? So even if it's going to cost us more, so the cash is available to spend more, but then there's a consideration of we want to spend the cash, but also do we want to go ahead and pay more? Like if the costs are temporarily inflated, are we getting this value? So that's all kind of things that we need to think about. Or council could look at reducing planned projects to stay within the planned dollar amount. So there's a lot there, and it is in an uncertain environment. And as I said, like probably there's no need to panic right now. Like we're fine for this financial year. We've got cash backed up, so it's more about thinking about the possible scenarios and having
we start panicking.
Sorry.
When the shooting
should we
starts.
start?
Yeah, that's
When
true.
Trump wakes up in the morning
Yeah.
and every other day after that.
Yeah, so as of now,
Sorry, it's serious. I was joking, but it was a serious question. What is the point if these costs continue to rise at this rate? When is the point where it becomes critical?
yeah. So what we're hoping to achieve through this workshop is having a plan, and then that plan would look at if the impacts are short term, what might that look like? What we might do if they're medium term, if they're long term. So we will have a plan. So there should never be a case of we need to panic. If we have a good plan, then we just implement it. That's the best thing anyone can do at this stage.
Thanks, written in your plan.
Panic now.
You want to
Plan for the best. Well, we've got to plan for the worst.
No,
It's not the other way around.
We will plan for all scenarios. So, because I'm not saying that bad things are not going to happen, but the best thing we can do right now is, there's no point in saying we're not going to do anything next year because we might not have money, right? We're not going to do that. So the best thing we can do is have scenarios and navigate through that and update and adapt. So when I say having a plan, it also needs to be an adaptable plan. We need to be able to a flexible plan.
You don't want to necessarily make radical changes that are going to impact the community if you don't need to,
That's right.
but you do need to do it if you have to. And so it's a little bit like braking a car, how right now our we're watching, but our foot is just above the brake. The question is, when do we go quiet? We're fortunate we do have some reserves, so we can trade through it in the short term. But if this looks like it's a systemic and endemic and long-lasting problem, then we do have to make some more significant changes.
Well, that's exactly the question. How we go before it becomes that critical point where we have to change our.
But at the current status, at those numbers, we probably could be years. But those numbers are our estimates. They might be twice as high. They might be half the size. So, and you don't know how long it's going to last for. So we just have to be really careful. And
a lot of the costs will be baked in and back. Oil will go back.
But we'll get some of those costs.
Inflation's not going to.
We'll get some of those costs back from the rate cap.
And there may also be some decisions made to government. There's some discussion about effect.
So we need to, here's not probably the scenario to work through all the modelling and how we're going to take it, but we as a group have got to work out what approach we're going to take as we adopt the budget and how we adjust that budget through next year.
I might just leave the discussion on that there because we do have the workshop on the 23rd, which will be a full day discussion on this, and they're all great points. But do you have any further slides to go through? Okay. One question I had, which obviously will help inform the Saturday session, is the $13 million estimated that you've got. What is that? I know it's a combination of things, but what are you mainly concerned about in that dollar amount? Is it fuel? Is it the secondary items that you've listed like plastic? Is it bitumen? Is there anything in there particular that you think is more concerned than others?
So what we've done is items that are obvious like fuel, chemicals, fertilizers.
I will provide some further information if you wouldn't interrupt, please. Because, like, for example, say petrol, is that petrol and diesel? Diesel's obviously gone up a lot more than petrol. So is it the diesel that we're worried about? Like, out of the $13 million of cost, how much of that is fuel? How much of that is supplies? How much of those second order beneficiaries?
We have the details here, but we have done the detailed analysis. So there's probably about more than 10 specific lines that we know that they're getting impacted. And then what we've done with the balance of the materials and services budget, we've applied a CPI increase, because the other thing driving this is not just the cost of specific things, but CPI in general is higher than what we budgeted. So there's going to be additional cost on everything just because of CPI.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the other impact is potential impacts on revenue. So if there's a big slowdown in the construction market and we get less DA incomes, but if there's a cost of living squeeze and people pull their kids out of childcare one day a week to save money, or they drop their gym membership, or they don't go to the holiday parks as often, there's potential impacts on revenue. But we just don't know where that's going to land. So maybe we actually have greater numbers of people at the holiday parks because they're not going overseas. Or maybe, like during COVID, people utilise the time to plan for their renovations and get the DAs in, even if they're not going to move to construction. So we're not quite sure how that's going to play out. But if there's cost of living pressures on the general community, then the general community may be more inclined to utilise hardship provisions for the payment of their rates and charges, but also for their discretionary items. The local community are our customers.
The budget papers have coming out with an underlying estimate of inflation at 5% for next year, and with the potential to go to 7% if things go up. Our rate increase next year is 3.5%. So you can see there's a gap we have to cover, ignoring some of the top line items that CPI, that's consumer price index, not our capital cost index, and we do rely on some oil-based products, particularly bitumen and plastics. So,
and will you share those estimates with us before the workshop in terms of the $30 million figure. Sorry.
I was going to pick up on given us the costs, but there could be some income increases as well.
Through interest.
To pick up David's point, what I was going to ask, so have we gone back, or is our association gone back to state government and says, hang on a minute, your rate cap is now demonstrably too low. Can we get the rate cap increased, please? Isn't that an action that the industry should be taking? Anyone doing that? Do we know?
I've heard no communication out of LG New South Wales on that. Generally, the rate cap is in arrears. That's one of the problems. So you actually end up with lag. The last time we had big inflation and the inflation came off, our rate cap was higher in that year when inflation was coming down. I think we had a 4.7 and you had inflation at 3.2 right at the tail. But mind you, when inflation was 7.3, we had a rate cap of 3.5. So we will pick some up if all things stay the same. Right now, there's going to be a gap. Now, as I said, we have the advantage that we've got some reasonable financial buffers, which we talked about.
But not some councils won't. So yeah, anyhow, it'd be fun. So many councils won't have that.
Councils won't. Many councils will be in all sorts of.
I'll be in exactly the same discussion. So that's a no-brainer that association should be doing that. I'm not saying it'll be successful, but it's worth a try.
With your friends.
Friends.
Any further questions?
Well, and then just sort of a follow-on. So have we thought about things like, God forbid, but sporting fees, where presumably the cost of mowing goes up because that's a diesel use, fertiliser use? Should we be looking at increasing the cost, the fees we charge?
So in the fee,
on particular services where there's a clear, demonstrable, cost increase to what we're doing.
so because this started happening as literally as we were about to exhibit the documents, we've actually put comments in the fees and charges document, specifically a comment around the waste charges, and also a general comment about the fact that the fees and charges as exhibited were based on the CPI at the time. And essentially that flags that we can go back and revisit what those fees are. So that's another piece of work that we need to do, because wherever it's possible to, so council is a bit in difficult spot, because wherever it's possible to pass on the cost, council can consider that. But then there's the other side of the community potentially also coming back and having difficulties. So
I don't necessarily want to do it, but I just think we've got to look at it.
yes, we will. Yeah, and reflect
An option available to you.
Further questions on this item? Happy to.
If I could just make a comment, speak to it. I'm going to have you move the recommendation.
I'll give you a brief comment.
Thank you. And Chris, I'll be interstate at the workshop, so I'll try and come in online, but don't know how successful that'll be from Western Australia. But I think middle course is the logical course stage. Make some adjustments and then review it. You can keep making adjustments as required. Course of the year, to me, that's the only logical thing you can do at this point in time.
Thank you for those comments. And we tend to agree. So I'm happy to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Eaton. All those in favour? Unanimous? Everybody? I will move on to item 2.3, the commercial property asset review and strategy. I'll do that after 2.4. No presentation. I did have questions on this, and I'm not sure who they'd be best directed to, but I know in the report it sort of says council property as a means of investing, and I can appreciate that. With the backdrop that I'm also not the biggest fan of council's investment guidelines at a state and federal level, not necessarily the council. if council was to go down the path of looking at some property purely for the creation of investment opportunity, would that be like holiday parks? I know that's quite a big revenue source for us.
Nichols.
Well, we just a holiday park, so, but it would be something that it's an investment grade investment and we're purely doing it for the return. So I suppose the difference is we've got very few of those investment grade investments. We've got a lot of things that are for multiple reasons. So it could be like they're looking to revitalise the town centre and we've got trying to get a facility into that centre. But yes, it's great investment grade returns and the advice so far as that could be an industrial, for example, invest in industrial buildings.
Would council ever consider something like a data centre?
The government is trying to increase housing supply by spending $2 billion over the next 4 years supporting local councils.
You're in the budget, are you there, Belinda?
Might be able to double it.
So yeah, I mean, we haven't got that far yet, but the idea that we're doing.
Get it back to the session.
So we'd look at the returns on it, and if it met our benchmark for returns, then it would be an opportunity for investment.
Cool. Council owned data centre. No, I'm only kidding. Any further questions, Councillor McGregor?
So obviously there's a bit of discussion there about acquiring properties. What about disposing of properties? Are we disposing of properties on an annual basis? Is there a plan there? Is what's happening?
So we'll come back, we'll finish this is an update, this report. We'll have finished the property review in June, and then we'll be putting it on the agenda for what leads our discussion at the next Finance and Governance Committee after that. The general idea is to improve the portfolio. We need to sort of divest ourselves of the poor performance, and we need to sort of invest more into the good performing parts of our portfolio, and then so that's one element. And you would imagine that means we divest some things that aren't really commercial assets, invest in others, and that could be, for example, a zero blue and investing in a zero blue. But then the bigger decision is: do you then want to recycle the money from property sales that we've been doing into a fund that then actually looks at investment grade properties and actually build the portfolio with straight investment grade companies? What we've said in the report is that we think it's about 18 to 20 million investment that would be needed if you want to build up our annual income by $1 million. So, but yeah, so an answer would be involving some divestment of poor performers.
The reason why I asked the question is because historically over the term since this council was conceived, for lack of a better word, 10 years ago, there was $20 million a year budgeted for getting rid of stuff, right? And then we had roughly $200 million worth of sales with the administrator in tranche 1 and tranche 2. So I was wondering what's actually left that has any value at this point as well. I've done much work on assessing what's currently there, based on what's with the impact of historical sales.
It knows less about the sort of historical sales and how the different assets we've got. So we've done a lot of work in assessing all the different assets we have and really be able to decide which ones that actually don't get much of a commercial return, but which ones do. So that's the sort of information will come back in the next report. Yeah, I mean, this isn't about land sales. This is, for example, a good performer is we've got a medical centre, for example, at Banno Bay. That's one of our best performers. It's investment. It's great investment. Whereas there's a lot of other things that we don't get much of a return.
As I've always said to Director Rackamolera, I find it very interesting that council can invest in these sorts of property, but if you go through a fund manager whose sole responsibility is to invest in a portfolio of underlying assets around these sorts of structures, you can't do that. I've always found that interesting. You'd actually probably have more diversification, less risk in that scenario than on a property, which again, dismays me. But regardless, Councillor, any question?
Thank you. I thought, thank the director for the report. I thought it was certainly a step in the right direction. And if you revert back to our last discussion, we clearly need to find money wherever we can. What I did notice, though, it seems to only talk at this stage about assets that have got some sort of income stream, and yet, in my view, we've probably got even more valuable assets that are not currently deriving any income stream because, for instance, their car parks in terms of Fukley, or even here at Wyong with the one down near the river. Not Terrigal, might get one in the future. Another one which is kind of a bit extreme maybe, but the Charmhaven Depot, probably worth $30 to $50 million. Why can't we move the depot to Buttondary? These are the sort of things that I think we've got to be looking at, and the strategy doesn't really talk about them at this stage. I understand. I think there's a stage 2, isn't there, Mr. Director? So I'd encourage you to have a look at stuff like that in stage 2.
Yeah, there's, for councillors, there's a first stage which is going to be publicly available information, the approach and that we're looking at. And the stage 2 is going to be that more commercially sensitive information that we wouldn't necessarily want to give out because it's about what we would potentially be purchasing and investing in. So, but at this stage, it's a commercial property portfolio or commercial portfolio that we're looking at, and you have to look at it. Transfer council's other assets over into the portfolio. We haven't done that at this stage.
If we sold them, then we could use that money by income generating money, because we need income, isn't that right, Mr. CEO? Really?
Indeed, and potentially, and the piece that I guess I've always been keen on throughout my career is taking advantage of land that we have access to that nobody else does. That Calday Parks is an example of that. Prime land, cafes and kiosks in waterfront locations. One of our, you see the Pavilion because of its unique location and the income potential from that, and that there is some potential opportunities in those locations. Something like Charmhaven Depot is an interesting concept, but you've got to sit down and say,
it's long term.
What's the re-establishment be?
Sure.
And yeah, so there's some of those things there, and I'm not sure of the status of Erina Depot. You have to determine is it freehold or not. Value and Crown land. It's a range of challenges.
Any comment, Councillor?
Yeah, just comment. I know it seems very attractive to, we can sell up the facilities on the land we own. And sometimes they can do that. The trouble is that often, sometimes they don't do well. They actually, and that's certainly been the experience in the Central Coast. So I wouldn't say absolutely no, but I think we have to be exceedingly cautious to ensure actually human funds.
Yeah. Any further discussion? I will move the recommendation if I have a seconder.
Just thought I was letting somebody else do it. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor.
Come on, Alan. What's your name on the book?
All those in favour? Unanimous. Item 2.4, the draft disability inclusion action plan. We don't have a presentation on this one, but Councillor Castles, did you have some questions?
Had a bit of a query, I guess. So through you, Chair, and appreciate community. So I note that the draft disability inclusion action plan is included here for the Governance Finance Committee. I'd just like a bit of clarity, if I could, through you, one of the directors, because looking through the terms of reference to the Community and Culture Committee, it actually says in there that committee may provide advice, input, and feedback on matters relating to social, community, and cultural matters, including at point 3 of the scope, 3.13. Disability access and inclusion. My question is, why is this particular action plan, which has been out on public exhibition, as I could see, why does that come to this committee and it does not to the Community and Culture Committee. I can see there are crossovers between it all. I understand that, but I just like a bit further explanation as to why it's sitting here and doesn't sit with Community and Culture.
Director.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Castles. It is a really good question. It is something that the Director of Community and Rec and I discussed. Because this is a whole of agency mandated plan, there's a couple of reasons why we determined it should come here. First of all, it's about specifically what council's going to do in this domain, so on our facilities, in our work for our employees, and because it's the whole of the organisation rather than one specific directorate undertaking that, and secondly, because it's around that legislative compliance piece, and so it just kind of pushed it over here. Could have gone to either, but we just felt that, you know, in terms of the whole achieving the outcomes documented in the plan, that he was a good place. As you can see, all of the directors and the CEO to support that, and it just shows our level of commitment to it across the entire organisation. But you're right, there is definitely a crossover, and we don't want to lose that, but there is the opportunity then, of course, at the council meeting to have all councillors involved in that as well.
Okay, and just perhaps sort of a supplementary to that, which I guess is more of a comment than anything else. I think it does illustrate to some extent sometimes how challenging it is with the standing committees, not with I'm not saying that lots of good work doesn't get done, but I know we've had a lot of debates over this where it does sometimes become very apparent that, or it appears to be as if siloing is really going on with some of these things, which I know that it isn't, but it can come across that way. But I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Because I appreciate also the Community and Culture Committee meets monthly, doesn't it? Monthly. Yeah, because it's quarterly as well. That doesn't seem to oppose any issues. Any further question? Yep, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair, Director O'Meara, probably expanding on those answers you were giving before. Interested in the employment and workforce inclusion aspect, very particularly in terms of council, and I couldn't kind of see if the plan actually includes measurable employment targets for hiring people with disabilities, and very particularly council having employment targets for and being a model employer in the community that way, by having those targets and how we meet those targets.
Yeah, certainly. That is something we are very interested in and committed to. There are a couple of I guess caveats in terms of having those KPIs, in that obviously we rely on self-disclosure and lots of people like to disclose, but our the disclosure numbers that we have at the moment are increasing. It is an area that we're really focusing on, and the people and culture team have been really intimately involved in developing this. So you'll see throughout the strategy that there are a high number of employment related strategies, goals and equivalent KPIs for that.
So those sort of approaches and that kind of thinking, can that help council address even any particularly unintended discrimination that can happen in the workplace, or not intended discrimination in the workplace?
Absolutely, and it's something that we're working towards. Just last week we do a quarterly induction for new staff, and just last week we had the first session where we had a very specific access and inclusion segment in the induction. So very extensive induction for all staff about just being aware of any of those issues, but both those unconscious bias issues was included in that as well. So it's something we're building. We've been doing for some time, and we're just getting better at it, and this plan is really guiding how we do that. You will see also in our workforce management plan that the DAP is cross-referenced to make sure that both teams are working cooperatively on that.
And just one more, and I've got some others, but I can put them on items. But kind of related to what Councillor Castles was asking about the community culture. I'm interested in how council addresses the intersection of disability and other categories of marginalisation or certainly housing insecurity, poverty, even transport disadvantage.
But I might need to ask Director Smith to respond to.
Thank you. So in the plan, there's specific areas that address the intersection across. There's items in there or deliverables in there that talk about transport and mobility and improvement. So, for example, one of the actions in there is about improving the footpath network and road transport network to enable people more mobility options. And I think one of the things about the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan, because it's mandated to us, there are certain things that we have to do. So the whole of the organisation has to have a filter that ensures that disability is considered in everything we do. So every plan we develop, every master plan, everything that we develop has a disability filter put across.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Director, because I think disability is an area that that it's really important that we really stay across those intersections because there's so many of them, and really any group, disadvantaged or otherwise, obviously can be affected by disability, and then all of those issues that affect any particular group affects people with disabilities in an even more detrimental way, obviously. Thank you.
Any further questions?
I'll put them on items.
Move the report.
You're a seconder. Councillor Castles, thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous. Very good. I do have a procedural motion to move. What wording? To move up item 2.10 relating to the lease and licenses of the surf club, because we have the staff here for that.
The one that's confidential.
Yeah, just see attachment is.
The recommendation.
Fine, everybody.
Well,
You have to tell everyone.
what? No.
Yes, okay. I did have one question on
You better put that.
the procedural motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'll move the procedural motion. Councillor Crowley's had a hand up. Yes, unanimous. Okay. I did just have one question on the item, and that was in regards only by chance that I had a conversation with Avoca Beach Surf Club over the weekend, and they mentioned that their organisation is going to have, they've got a water and sewer contribution upcoming of about $60,000. Director Loder, are you aware of that at all?
No, that I've had a look at what their bills have been over the last few years, but they've $60,000. They're not undertaking works or anything there. I'm not sure what that would relate to. For anything further that you can.
I could maybe provide some more information, but they basically said it was their contribution to water and sewer they had to provide as an organisation.
They might have meant for the whole.
Doing something.
They do have a DA.
That's what it'll be.
Which might, is that potentially more likely?
For sure.
Yeah.
So they've got an existing premises, but my understanding is there's a DA that's either just past council or with council at the moment.
For that facility itself.
Yeah, so it's for a commercial kitchen, I believe,
Okay.
which is already in operation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, it may be part of their contributions under that development. Consent.
I might take that away, and then if they have any further questions, they can contact staff directly. Also, perspective, is there any adverse situations that arise from, for example, I can see Terrigal here doesn't have an existing lease. Does that pose any issues for councils and organisation? Obviously, it's pretty assumed that these guys have an ongoing relationship given the nature of a surf club and a life-saving unit, but there.
So they're on a month-to-month agreement at the moment until this lease gets endorsed and there's not a lot of competition in
Yeah.
terms of who would run it.
Okay.
Maybe not.
There were any questions I have, but does anyone else have any further questions on that?
We know that Councillor Egan would like to sell the third.
I'm happy to move this recommendation. If I have a seconder.
Yeah, sure.
Clayton, all those in favour? Unanimous. I'll now move back to item 2.5 in relation to the Poet Trust. I did have one question for the Hock. I understand, again, by chance happened to run into those guys. The McMaster's Beach Bush Care Group has money that sits under the Poet Fund.
Yes.
And they've said to me last month, I think they were looking to have some money released. Do you have any updates on that request?
Yes.
To council?
The report will come to council in June. Ordinarily, there would be a trust advisory committee that would deal with it, but in the absence of an advisory committee, council as the trustee needs to make those decisions. And I've corresponded with Mr. Tony Powell of the McMaster's Bush Care just this evening to.
Big fan of yours.
Oh, that's nice.
Is that sarcastic?
No, he said I've spoken. You know, he's across it. He's got everything sorted. But I'm sure he does. Okay. Any further discussion? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So with the Poet Committee, are there any community members currently on it?
There is no committee currently.
How long has that been the case for?
So part of this audit which was requested by council was to interrogate the appropriate structure of a trust advisory committee. The trust deed provides for two separate committees, a management committee and an advisory committee. Since at least about 2017, council as trustee had operated a single management committee, the Poet Trust Management Committee. The audit found that committee in structure and substance and membership was non-compliant with the trust deed and with best practice and with DGR status, deductible status. And so the council will need to consider how to reconstitute a compliant trust management committee. It's a long way of answering your question, which is the existing advisory committee was disbanded in June or July of 2024 when all the advisory committees were spilled by the administrator before the caretaker period.
Thanks. Councillor Eaton?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned when I read the report about why it has been operating. Given that we don't have the report back, and we know it's not operating well. My view is that we should pause any distributions until we get the report. I won't be suggesting that added to the recommendation through that any distributions be paused pending the next report to the meeting, I think, isn't it?
I suppose, Councillor, and I'd caveat that this is money that, particularly for the McMaster's Beach example, which I think is quite unique, they have raised that money externally as an organisation through fundraising and events and whatnot, and council is the custodian of that money in a custodial capacity, and they would be seeking to have their funding removed from that as opposed to general Poet funding removed.
Is Poet actually discharging funds at this point in time? Since the management committee was dissolved in September 24,
To make the decision
Council makes the decision.
on the money that's held there.
Yes,
Is that
subject to applications. So what?
Consistent with the trustee?
Yes, in the absence of an advisory committee that's delegated by the trustee to disperse the funds, that decision is council as the trustee.
when you say council, you mean council officers or do you mean?
No, council council is the trustee. The elected body is the trustee of the trust. It's not up to council officers. Council officers had previously participated in advising or informing the non-compliant advisory committee, and had participated in the distribution of the fund, finance processes and what have you. But it's never been anything that council officers are responsible for or delegated to.
So just further to this point 3 that's suggested, are we actually distributing any funds out of it at this point in time?
Sorry, it'll be the August committee meeting.
No, there's not been a distribution since I think last year, which was determined by council to the McMaster's Bush Care Association.
We don't really need point 3. There's no distribution of funds.
If there's no distribution of funds, then why wouldn't you have it?
Well, any distribution of funds would require a council resolution, so
No.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I wouldn't support that only because of the McMaster's Beach example where it's their privately funds where council's acting as the custodian. You'd be open to an amendment, still take that. Okay.
Given the tenor of the report, I think the only safe thing to do is to, it's only for 3 months, not forever. Although I do note that the report effectively says we should can the process. That's what it really says. Read it. Or
Okay.
maybe come up with a different mechanism.
So are you seeking to move that as an amendment? So you will seek to move that as an amendment?
Get a second. Yeah, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, I wouldn't second that unless someone else wishes to. Just unfortunately.
Perhaps there's one second.
That's it.
Just briefly.
So do we now revert to
I would
the
have seconded.
original motion, I take it?
You want to move to
I'm happy.
recommendation?
I'm happy to move to staff recommendation if I have a seconder for that. Councillor McGregor. All those in favour of the staff recommendation? Councillor Wright, Councillor McGregor and Councillor Crowley against. Councillor Eaton? It's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Item 2.6, the investment management policy and investment strategy for review. I know this is something we spoke about in the last Governance and Finance Committee meeting, so good to see that the review has occurred because I think that's important. It's a considerable amount of money in there and professional advisory, the experts in this space. I do find it interesting that their investment philosophy, strategy and implementation ideals haven't changed in light of rising inflation and rising interest rates. However, I'm not in a position to disagree with their judgment on this thing as the expert in the space.
I'm a bit concerned though that the person who signed its signature is blacked out. Doesn't that give you a lack of faith?
No,
You can have the
so I'm happy to move to staff recommendation unless anyone.
I'll second just with a question. And I just wondered whether the title's really correct. But we just discussed earlier, we do have investments in real estate. This only talks about funds management.
I suppose
I haven't reviewed that though.
No, but I mean, this implies this is the only investment policy that we have. So I just wonder whether it should in fact say funds investment management.
Financial investment.
Yeah.
the other thing with that is I
It
think
doesn't change anything. It just makes it clear that that's what it's about.
as Director Nichols said though, that the property portfolio that we have isn't for investment purposes, which I get has an investment value, but then we'd have to put everything in our investment portfolio to say it has a cash value.
No, I'm not saying that. I just think the title could be better. But it's clear that I mean, as the CEO said, financial investment policy.
We do need to update the policy on an annual basis, and we'd be happy to take that.
I mean, what's in there, I've got no problem.
The other thing would be a question for staff, because you're asking, the staff recommendation is provides feedback for inclusion in the July 2020 policy update. to be submitted to council for adoption. Can we give you some verbal feedback, or would you prefer that moved in the motion?
I don't know, just give us feedback at any point in a way that works for you.
I think the verbal feedback is, I was actually speaking to someone at JB Weir today who, funnily enough, manages money for nursing homes, and was talking about how obviously they have very different investment guidelines, but they are looking at their whole investment philosophy for an institution like that is looking at how you can get better yield than a term deposit, and they're looking at bonds or ETFs as a slightly more up the risk curve item to look at. And again, I think the interesting thing for us is that council's not in a position to look at ETF, for example, or a managed fund, or even, as I said, we can invest in one commercial property.
You have to explain what an ETF is.
Exchange traded fund.
Yeah, I know, but not everyone knows. That's all.
So I just find that interesting, but I would be
around the water proper basis of making investment decisions.
It wasn't the basis of an investment decision, but an discussion to say I'd be interested in Perpetual's advice on what we could look at outside of what we're currently looking at investment-wise within those frameworks, whether that is, I imagine they would have some sort of advisory capacity even over commercial property, which would tie into item 2.3, and also other sort of financial instruments that would be permissible. Because I think particularly with interest rates rising, it's going to be interesting for things like term deposits. Can they get as much value there? Should we be going more to the bonds? Should it be fixed rate? Should it be floating rate? I think that'd be quite interesting. Particularly around fixed and floating rate, I think would be interesting at the moment. Any other feedback on that?
I think I prefer to rely on the professional report.
But that's what I'm saying. Get Perpetual to investigate this and come back to us.
Well, they've only just done the report now. What costs money, mate?
Yeah, but
of course it costs money. I mean, we've got quite a recent report. Another one immediately.
Yep.
In terms of any additional financial instruments, that should be fairly straightforward for them to advise on that.
We can ask a question.
Yeah,
Ask them.
and I would expect that a organisation of that size managing this amount of money would be able to answer questions throughout the year. Sounds like they are. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Moved and second.
Okay. I will put the motion then. Those in favour? Yes, thank you. Item 2.7, communications and media relations policy for review. Do I have any questions?
Not exactly a question, but I would prefer to move that we adopt communications and media relations policy. I don't see why it needs to go to exhibition. From what I could see, there was hardly any changes from what's already out there. I don't think something the public are going to be totally interested in. We'll probably get 3 or 4 submissions. Just going to create cost and achieve nothing.
Did you have any thoughts on that?
Certainly, Councillor Eden raises an option that's available to the committee to recommend to council that it's adopted directly. There's a few reasons for this. So specifically, there are a number of policies within the Act that must be advertised. This is not one of them. It is our standard practice to advertise all policies, but that doesn't mean that needs to change. Again, there are very few changes, and it is based mostly on the New South Wales OLG model media policy. So there's unlikely to be room for too many changes. And also the free speech in local government guidelines, which are a section 23A guideline, which means council must actively consider it to follow those guidelines unless there's a good reason not to. So that's a legislated guideline. So it is open to council to be able to directly adopt that. It's just not something that we have traditionally done in the past. So it would be up to the council to make that decision.
Just to finish off Councillor Eden's part. If you
in this manner.
okay, sure.
I know there's not a lot of changes, but I think once we start deciding some we will and some we won't, I think it's a general principle consultation with the policy is important. And I would be strongly for maintaining the consultation on this.
I agree when there's no changes.
No, I understood that.
When it's in
About no changes, there's few changes.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing,
changes of substance, put it that way.
the other thing too is, as people have raised in the council meeting before, there's a lot of, so it's almost too much on consultation at any given
Yeah.
time that the community starts to, they're getting notified about everything. And this, and to be fair, this only relates to councillors. It's not really like the budget where the community gets something for themselves out of it. So
They'd take to the next council meeting.
I see the rescission motion coming.
No rescission, I think it's just a good community debate.
Look, I suppose my point with that would be, if someone in the community is that excited about it, they can come to speak on the item in the public forum. Or they can email.
I think it's just a general principle that we do things transparently.
I can appreciate that, but at the end of the day, the document, the public can see it right now through the business paper. They've also got until the council meeting to look at it, send through any questions, as they quite often do. So, Councillor Written, if you are prepared to move some wording on that, I'm happy to.
Well, it just adopts the draft Communications and Media Relations Policy Attachment 1. That's it. Recommends the council. Yep. We don't need to, because there is no community feedback following public exhibition.
We ignore any committee.
Well, we won't ignore it, but it won't be following public exhibition.
So
it's just one.
I think
that's the
we're not
7th.
going to consider feedback. I don't think we should.
Okay.
For the committee.
That is coming on the screen now, Councillor Written. So just point 1 adopts the draft Communications and Media Relations Policy Attachment 1. I'm happy to second that. Those in favour? Councillor Crowley, Councillor Wright, Councillor Eaton, all those against? Councillor McGregor, that's carried. 2.8 closed circuit television policy for public exhibition.
The same.
Stop it, you.
Motion.
I would not second that, only because, again, I know I've said this happened a lot today, but there was a break-in in Hill Care last night, and I had 3 people come to me and say, "Oh, we want CCTV in the area." So I'd be keen to see the policy around that and how they could look at implementation.
That's not the policy. It's about whether you want to
about
camera there.
About the data, sure, but I put that one out of consultation.
You want staff recommendation?
Yeah.
Are you moving that way?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Second.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor McGregor. All those in favour? Councillor Crowley, do you have a position?
Well, I'm not sure what I think about it. I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, sorry.
The fact that we don't have CCTV around a place, is that purely monetary? Because it's I know it's expensive.
We do have some extensive CCTV networks, and we are expanding them in certain areas with a focus on council facilities at the moment. So we are working through that.
1,300, they said in the report.
300, wasn't it?
I thought it was 1,300.
1,300.
1,300, yeah, there you go.
The experts
That's
in
a lot.
I understand it is a lot, but where there's vandalism and people doing, a lot of damage around the place, I'm just wondering whether that would outweigh the cost of repairing the damage.
It could possibly. Just to make clear, the policy doesn't outline the places where we will or will not have cameras. It's about how any cameras we have are operated, and it aligns with the various legislations. As you can imagine, there are a lot that relate to this area. I didn't know, do you guys want to add anything, being the experts in the room?
I think you covered it, Marissa. It's more about just an overall outline about the governance. It's more about the protection of people's privacy and information.
Yeah, see, I think that's also interesting as the report talks about in relation to AI and easier access to information. How do we maintain people's privacy?
It doesn't actually change. Again, it's virtually just reiterating the current policy. So it's not as though we're changing something. That's where I have the problem with going out and because people actually probably assume that we are changing something. So that's just my view about these things.
Sorry, Director Bogle.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Just in relation, there is a section that looks at some considerations if we are going to put a camera in, and cost does come into it. It also is, dealing with the police. Is there any antisocial behaviour? So there's a fair bit of detail on this that we do consider. In relation to putting it out on exhibition, I understand Councillor Eaton's view, and I've had policies of, indicating the same sort of view. In this one, I would support putting it out on public exhibition because we do have some cameras that go directly to the police, and I want to be able to engage with them as well in this particular case.
I think I raised a councillor information request about this once before.
Excuse me.
There are a number of companies out there. I actually did a site visit to one recently where you can plug your CCTV cameras into their network and you get access to their full network of cameras. So companies that might have the rights to, say, Transport for New South Wales Council will be able to see the cameras across their network as well, so you can see train stations if they had them.
Sounds very dodgy. Suddenly get access.
Careful of that.
It was just more so whether council would ever give.
Whether you can and whether you should are two different things.
Just what else?
I don't think the state government are very happy of everyone accessing their feed to railway stations.
Well, actually,
Bluetooth on your phone. It's not that difficult. That's part of the problem with these things. They're really easy to steal information from and to basically use quite maliciously.
But also the state government doesn't even run the Transport for New South Wales cameras. It's run by a private company.
Yeah, but they're big subcontractors to them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that something as a council we'd ever explored, where we've got an issue with someone, say, breaking into a council facility where you say, oh, actually, I can tap the police feed, I can see what ambulance New South Wales has got. I can see if the person's got off the train at Gosford and then come to Gosford Regional Library with the spray can.
We would leave that up to the police investigation.
Sure.
To follow an individual suspect.
Do it in your spare time.
Not spray paint.
The guys looking at me.
And most, if not all, of our CCTV are not permanently monitored. So certain councils and councils I've worked in have had with large CBDs have an active monitored system with complex cameras and a direct interaction with the police and a whole range of things like that. What we have is a significant network of cameras that are intermittently monitored. There's not risk, but there's always challenges that, when you do have an event, the microphone is actually broken because nobody's looked at the last 6 months. There's a range of challenges when you set up extensive networks. It's not just cost, but it is money. It's about the cost of making sure that they're working and replaced and renewed because they don't last forever.
Any further questions on that?
Can we get a map of where all the CCTVs?
All 1,300.
They must be recorded somewhere.
Well, there's one in your bedroom.
It's just a lot of people ask me, where does council have cameras?
We don't necessarily want to tell them.
Yeah.
But can we get them?
Kind of defeats the purpose.
What other
Does
questions?
anybody know where they are?
Just because this is
Probably not
the
all.
last item of business.
Sorry, this is I'm waiting for an answer.
2.9 was moved on, Mass.
Was it done?
We're done.
But you have to move this.
Oh, yeah, you've got to move this, yeah.
Can we get an answer?
Does anyone want to answer Councillor Neal's question?
Do we have a record of where they are?
We have a list. Wouldn't have necessarily a map. I wouldn't be able to provide you.
I'm happy with the list.
I'd have to look into the ability to release that. I'll take that on notice.
We're not releasing it. We are councillors. You may have noticed that we're elected after 18 months.
And a significant number would be on our sort of operational assets, like our depots and this building, a range of things like that. Not so much in public spaces, but we do have them in public spaces and assets as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an idea of where they are and how it impacts on the community. I'm happy.
We could probably get you.
Yeah, if you think I'm going to rush out and tell all my neighbours, I'm prepared to sign an undertaking that I won't distribute it.
So for public space cameras, that information is certainly public. They're signposted. So cameras in the public space are signposted. What we would not want to be made available to the community is cameras in our facilities.
I'm not particularly interested in
So
that.
if the public space ones you're interested in, yeah, certainly, I'm sure we can provide an overview of where they're located.
Thank you.
One final question on CCTV. I believe the federal government back in 2015 or 2016 gave council a whole bunch of, I think, 20 mobile security cameras. Do we still have those?
They wouldn't work if they're 10 years old.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was going to say, because I think it was Karen McNamara who got them.
Yes.
Karen's spoken to me about them before.
Yeah, I think.
2016, you probably find it's at the end of their useful life.
I only ask because Karen will no doubt ask me at some point.
Oh, Karen wants to know where they are.
Yeah, I think Karen's like, are they out?
You want them back?
They've come around too. I can't remember.
They would be way past their useful life.
On that note,
No one's got a 10-year-old iPhone.
any further questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, concerns? I'll put the motion that I've moved and Councillor McGregor has seconded. So all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That leaves us with the closing statement, which is, I note that the next meeting is to be held at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 14th of July, 2026 at the Wild Administration Building. I now declare the meeting closed at...
August, wouldn't it be?
Oh, sorry, must be misprinted.
3 months. 3 months is all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be the Tuesday, the 14th of August, 2026 at the Wild Administration Building. I now declare the meeting closed at 8:40.